Hello and welcome to our Business of Flight Week here in the David B. O'Malley College of Business. I'm Shannon Gibson and I am super excited to continue our ongoing series and where can my degree take you? Talking to professionals in the aviation, aerospace, and space business about where their career can take them and what are the exciting opportunities that exist. Today, our panel is on big data and analytics in the aerospace industry. It's being moderated by Dr. John Longshore, and I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Longshore and the panel to let them introduce themselves and move forward. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Dean Gibson. Folks, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. We have distinguished panel guests up here that I'll get to in just a few moments, but I'd like to share with you something, the importance of data analytics. Back in the day, sitting at the Naval Aviation Rework Facility, I can remember going to the test center and testing at that particular time an F402 engine, which was used on our Harrier. We were looking at analog gauges, and we were vigilantly taking a look at our engine gauge temperature to make sure that when we were testing that engine, that we weren't clicking the counter and doing that. I see some head shaking and doing that because you only had a certain number of times that you could click because of the amount of thrust and heat that you were putting in the engine. Now we've gone to the aspect that we've got engines right now that are downloading and hitting over 5,000 data points a second in the GE engine in any one of the four major manufacturers right now. And that's on the Airbus, right? And that's on the Airbus and on the 787. We're using right now, we've got on the Airbus and in 787, we've got over 30,000 sensors that are constantly pushing data, 500 gigabytes of data on one flight alone. And that's average coming into it. So that's the world we're going into. The flight logbooks, no more knee pads that we used to fly with. Now it's all electronic. They're taking raw data and you're using that raw data in the flight, on the flight by the pilots to help them make decisions in reference to how they should be flying, the best route to take, how that aircraft is operating. They're sensing it as they're moving forward. That's the world that we're working in right now. And number one, you know, I'm a logistics nut. So I'm looking at that and saying, now we can pre-position our resources if we want to. And we can say it's going to land in Italy. We need to have a pump in Italy to make sure we're changing that high time pump out. That's how it's done, folks, to do it. So let me introduce our distinguished guest to you and let's just move forward because the question that we ask is how did each one of these professionals use data analytics in their daily business? How did they use it? So we have Edwin, Pablo, we have another distinguished guest, and what I'd like for them to do is to give you just a brief synopsis of their background before we begin. Is that all right? Edwin, we'll start with you.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Edmund Otubwa. I'm a 2003 graduate of Embry-Riddle College of Business. By way of background, my journey started working in data analytics and insights for JetBlue Airways. I was there for about 10 years. I was part of the Operations Analysis Strategic Planning Group. After I left JetBlue, I started a data analytics startup called MassFlight, where we built a big data analytics platform that powers a lot of the business intelligence tools and operational systems at airlines, airports, and other aviation companies. After about 5-6 years, our company was then acquired by my current employer, which is Anuvu, where we are a global leader in in-flight connectivity and in-flight entertainment. And so through it's been 20 years now. 20 years now in the industry, you know, I've seen firsthand the transformative power of data analytics in enhancing operational efficiency and customer experience, and just excited to be here to kind of talk to you guys through that journey and answer any questions you have. Pablo?
Thank you very much, Edwin.
No problem.
Hi, I'm Pablo Aguirre, Chief Commercial Officer at Nexus, and My career started in the Air Force. I spent 6 years in the U.S. Air Force. After leaving the Air Force, I was part of Omni Air International, which is one of the larger charter airlines in the United States, mostly focused on moving the U.S. troops around the world. I was there for 10 years, started in FP&A, made my way up into the commercial side as well as the fleet side. And after 10 years, I joined Zephyrus Aviation Capital. I was at Zephyrus, managed the data science team, and as well as the Americas for the commercial side. In 2021, I transitioned to Amtra Aero, which is a family-owned office that is one of the joint venture partners of Nexus Aviation Ventures, and we've been investing in airplanes since, with a focus on the A321 converted freighter. So aircraft leasing, airline, both been part of my career. And in terms of an educational background, I have my bachelor's degree from Oklahoma State University and a master's from Syracuse University in data science.
Pablo. My name is Hervé Lavenant. I am managing director with United Airlines. I manage the logistics worldwide for United. So in that role, I lead 1,700 people that handle the parts for United, the tools for United, cabin provisioning for United, all the materials for heavy checks for United, any airplane modifications that we do, and we do a lot in this day and age with all the 12 fleets of our narrow bodies. Also manage safety and compliance for supply chain, logistics across the entire airline, anything that we've got to move for the airline, internal movements to the airline, and other small arrays of CI. I have been with the airline, with United, the entirety of my career, 18 years ago. I started fresh out of MBA school at Embry-Riddle in 2005. And I have worked in network planning, in operations planning, operations analysis, crew scheduling, crew resources, FP&A, tech ops, and now this role in logistics. Gifted to have worked as well with a couple of my peers here on the panel while at the airline. Sam was my boss in the past when I was in network planning. We always aim, of course, as you might imagine, to disservice the least of customers. And so my customer is mostly the internal customer as the head of logistics, but ultimately, we really impact our external customers all the time. So we strive to have a very high service level. So I'll give you, before I pass it on to Sam, just a very quick story. Amazon delivers to you same day, if you're lucky, next day, realistically, if you're Prime. My service level for delivery, if it's available locally, is 30 minutes. If it is not available locally, it is 6.5 hours. So keep in mind that logistics is a space that is very, very, very dynamic, and we'll touch base on that in a little bit when it comes to big data.
Thank you. Afternoon, everyone. My name is Sam Patel. I'm a Chief Financial Officer for a company called Ccash out of Chicago. Started my career, graduated from Embry-Riddle in 1999 and started at Continental Airlines. Little did I know much about data analytics back in the 90s, but one of the first projects I worked on was how many people clicked on an online banner and how many people bought tickets. That was when no one used a website to buy stuff. That was kind of one of the first projects I ever worked on. Spent my career with Continental and United, various departments, revenue management and pricing, network planning, working with Hervé, flight profitability analysis. That was really the first foray into big data, where we had our own database of pretty much all of the costs, the general ledger, and all the statistics of the airlines coming together and trying to allocate that on a flight-by-flight, cabin-by-cabin basis. Little different now. The company Ccash, we use airline data to do predictive analytics. So we'll get into a little bit later on. But it's more, rather than using data to help the company, we kind of use the data to create the company. So that's my background.
Thank you. Afternoon. My name is Chandresh Maltani. I am a partner at Kearney. What Kearney is, it's a management consulting firm. So what that really means is we help companies solve big problems, and we charge them a lot of money. Airlines didn't hear that. So my background is I graduated in 2000. My first job was Delta Airlines. I was an engineer for Delta. Then I switched to United. I moved up to Chicago, where I met these guys. I was in United for about 10 years. Loved my time at United, mainly in FP&A. Towards the end, after the merger, I was in fleet strategy. And what fleet strategy means is essentially you're buying and selling airplanes. I'm proud to say I was part of the MAX 9 deal, not the MAX 10 deal, because that was done after I left. That's where the problems are. And then I felt like something was missing in my life. It's just, that was the reason why I left Delta to go to United. I felt like something was missing. Somebody has described Taipei's as insecure overachievers. And I feel like I'm one of them. That at Delta, I felt like something was missing. I went to United. At United, I felt like something was missing. Mid-career, I'm switching into consulting, it's very hard to begin with, to get into consulting at age 22, and then you're doing it at mid-career. And then not just surviving, but thriving in consulting. And then now with Kearney, last year, where they recruited me to start the aviation practice. So happy to be here. My examples are going to be very much client related, less about what Kearney does, but very tangible in terms of big data.
Thank you all. I told you they were very distinguished, didn't I? Well, we got some good players up here. I think we got some good players in our entire business leadership team. You know that? I mean, really, think about the talent we have. Okay, folks, Rick and I, we had just a brief meeting concerning this. I probably scared the bejesus out of Rick because I said, you do realize that we'll be on spring break when you would like this all done. So we just brainstormed a little bit. And we said, let's just ask one question. And the question was, how do you use data analytics in your daily work? And so we'd like for you to elaborate on that. And if you don't mind, Edwin, we're going to start in the same order that we did the introductions. So give us a little bit of a briefing on how you use data analytics, since that's what you do right now. You run your data analytics. How do you use it daily?
I don't get off mute. Yeah, no, that's a good question. So I mean, I think for myself and my team, I mean, we use it in a variety of ways. So we actually are responsible for managing our company's internal data platform. So responsible for the design, the implementation of our big data platform. So I have a team of data scientists, data engineers, cloud computing experts that are responsible for taking, like Dr. Longshore mentioned earlier, there is a vast amount of data that's generated from the aircraft sensors. We're talking about terabytes and terabytes of data per day, data per flight. And one of the things we focus on at Anuvu is being able to leverage pieces of that information, which is all the information that's coming from the satellite. So information that tells us internally about what our how the Wi-Fi connectivity, for example, is performing, in-flight entertainment movies, what passengers are performing. And so we take all of that information, ingest it into the cloud, ingest into our data platform systems, and then transform that to use it for strategic decision making. So being able to use it to understand how our Wi-Fi connectivity services are working. How is the hardware performing? The modems, how are the movies performing, so on and so forth. And each day when I wake up, log onto the computer, I have reports waiting on me every day. And this information gives us clues and referencing points into what opportunities we have today, what's failing, what's working, what's not working. And, we have, strategic meetings throughout the day, kind of regarding this. And, kind of what I've learned in my journey in terms of how data is using is it's not really about the amount of data that you have. It's really how you and your team can use it to support decision making, whether it's from, in my past when I used to work at JetBlue in terms of using data to identify, turn time analysis to see, how long it takes to turn the aircraft. When, I guess I have a story for you guys too. My first project when I was at JetBlue was we got assigned to go to the airport. I thought I was this, big bad graduate from Embry-Riddle, was going to have some corner office or something. They said, hey, you're going to be at the airport for the next 2 weeks. You're going to have a stopwatch, and you're gonna measure how long it takes for each passenger to deboard a plane and then stop, and then how long it takes passengers to board the next plane. And so I was there for about 2 weeks, stop, start. And then we had to measure every single part of the process, whether it was the boarding, the amount of times that how long it took for the gate agent to check in each customer, how long it took for the ramp agents to load the bag. So every process, because each one of those phases are essential in what we call the turn time process. Every minute counts. So when you guys land at an airport, you guys get off, the next plane comes on, every minute is crucial in terms of the efficiency, in terms of the things that, like, Hervé used to do in his past life, Sam, Chandresh, and, what he does for consultants, and really identifying, how efficient you can be as an airline in turning around a plane, because there's costs associated to it, there's revenue implications to it. And so, using all this information on a daily basis allows us, to make, quick, to make vast decisions, kind of throughout the day. And so I take all of these kind of reportings, have the strategic meetings kind of with my team, to set the stage on kind of what we want to tackle, kind of for each day. So, I mean, every day is kind of different, kind of for us, because, we manage, not only the in-flight connectivity side of the house and in-flight entertainment side of the house, but we still manage the mass flight operational business, where, we provide, the data platform systems for, our airline customers and airport customers to use our data platform to then, use it for decision making on their own. So every day is kind of different for me, but it's kind of all around, data, building dashboards, monitoring KPIs, and really keeping a pulse on kind of what's going on in the operation, and then serving up recommendations to our leadership team on how we can, improve various aspects of our operation.
Thank you, Edmund.
Yep.
Pablo.
Hey, yes. So, where I feel like from the airline side, there's a torrent of data coming towards an airline. From the aircraft leasing side, it's more like a stream or a trickle that comes our way. So the data inflows, when you look at it from an aircraft leasing platform perspective, tend to be few and far between. So if I were to sit here and talk in general about aircraft leasing, it's a very inefficient market. Information is very siloed, and transactions happen without the market really knowing what's going on, except at the conclusion of a transaction. So, if you can compare it to something like the equities market or the bonds market, which is full of information, constant real-time information and update, the aircraft leasing side doesn't have any of that. And so you might be looking at an engine deal somewhere in the other side of the world, and that guy, maybe he doesn't know the engine as well as the guy next door, and you're just dealing with that information on a daily basis. So when you look at it from a data sourcing perspective, there's really three things that I look for on a day-to-day basis in order to build up our data platform and to make, intelligent decisions when we look at investing. Primarily, you have real-time data, and so we're starved for real-time data in our industry. So when we look at, say, for example, I'll give you an example. We want to get the temperature of the market, for example, of what's going on in the market in general. There really isn't a way or a market I can turn on. There isn't a Bloomberg channel for aviation financing that I can put on. So one way we mitigate that is by creating algorithms that read the news, for example. And so we've got algorithms that can read through the news and distill down all of the information, the pertinent words that are being used in the media, down to regions. And then we can map all of that, for example. That's one way we can, on a daily basis, run an algorithm through production where we can actually see what's going on in the world and get a temperature for, okay, there's a lot of transactions happening in this part of the world. This part of the world seems pretty quiet. And we can actually rate the words, for example, using a lexicon, and say, score words that are more impactful. So if the word bankruptcy comes up often, then that would be scored much lower than, say, for example, investment or something like that. So in a way, real-time data is one thing we look for in our industry, and there's ways of mitigating that. Usually most published financial data is on a lag. So in order to get that real-time information, you have to coalesce a lot of news sites, or you can, for example, look at tracking aircraft, movement of aircraft, see how long aircraft are being parked. One thing to mitigate, for example, the fleet movement of airplanes within your fleet, or within the airline or a lessee's fleet, let's say, for example, is by tracking each one of their airplanes. And then you can actually pinpoint, for example, when they're performing maintenance on an aircraft, when the aircraft has been sitting. You can be proactive. And for example, you can have the algorithm queue you up or queue up your sales guy who's covering that area to say, hey, your airplane's been down for a week and you might not be aware of it. But it gives you a touch point to go out to the lessee and say, just saw that the airplane's on the ground, something happened to the airplane, or is there a reason, or is it down for an A check, as a touch point. But that's the way I've seen how you can mitigate real-time information when there isn't really a real-time source for you. The second prong, I would say, where I find myself looking for information is proxy data. So, we have an inefficient market, as I described. You have the scenario where you want to know whether a market's developing, for example, in a foreign country. Let's say, when nearshoring was a big thing, that nearshoring was every other word out of everybody's mouth, for about 2 years. There isn't a real database of nearshoring that you can go to. So the way we mitigated that was we created an algorithm, and I'll use Mexico for an example, from a nearshoring perspective. If you want to see, for example, the potential growth of cargo volumes out of Mexico, you can do that by analyzing the development of the factories in Mexico. And what we did was we coalesced a database of satellite imagery. And it just so happens that in Mexico, they love to paint their roofs white, which creates a high level of contrast with the surrounding area. So we were able to measure the number of white pixels in a picture. So through looking at data over a number of years and coalescing a list of satellite images, we were able to see the growth in the development of buildings and factories in Mexico to see if there was really that foreign investment that everybody was talking about in the news, and then actually put a number to it. Now, the government itself publishes the development of those factories on a 6-month lag. So then you could go back and check, for example, to see that actual development and confirm your growth. And that's how we were able to see, for example, that certain cities in Mexico were getting a tremendous amount of investment and development from different industries in order to deal with the inflow of nearshoring. I'll give you a third example of things that we do in aircraft leasing from a data science perspective, like I said, we're starved for information in a way. So one thing we've had to be really good at is synthetic data engineering, which is you have a small database of information, a small pool of, say, for example, engine information that you've collected over the last couple of years. But when you want to run a bigger model, you need more data points in order to run that model and to get something that's important or something meaningful out of that. So what we've done, for example, is create models that build up databases of, say, for example, engines by using a small pool of engines to then engineer, a larger set of engines that you can then run a model off of and get something material out of. So, and those three are probably the biggest ways that we leverage, data science. I don't know if you would call it big data necessarily, because, we don't have these giant data feeds that we're pulling into. But it is a way of trying to make an inefficient market more efficient to make better decisions downrange.
Thank you very much, Pablo. Good examples too.
So I think I'll give 3 examples of how we use data at United. I'm sure it's very similar to the other airlines as far as how we handle it. The first one is what I would call data for business decision-making purposes. And I'll give one very tangible, topical example on which my team has worked. At United, we're looking at changing the way we distribute parts in the network. Our current model of parts distribution is a decentralized model, and we've made the decision to switch to a centralized model of distribution. And so the difference between the two is that in one network, you have 37 warehouses that act as mini distribution center, each with safety stock, and you just rotate your inventory around the world to make sure that your warehouses are constantly stocked to provide the right service level to your maintenance partner. A centralized model would infer that the parts come from one sole distribution center and is being distributed to the 37 other warehouses in the network to make sure that you still have the right service level and the right part at the right time. So when we studied the 2 different models, we went back in time. We took 12 months of data for one data cut. And we said, okay, let's model from an operations research standpoint, what would be the operating cost of model A versus the operating cost of model B? Model A being decentralized, model B being centralized. And you literally run everything through transportation cost, the real estate cost to include the cost of capital of making that investment. The biggest cost you've got to run is actually the inventory cost, where you actually have to model through what would the points of demand be. And to do that, you have to rely on your own forecasting model for parts demand and your own planning model for distribution of demand. And when we did all that exercise, we came back with an answer whereby the centralized distribution model was more cost effective to run for United. By the way, we're the last airline to switch that model. It took us years and years and years to get there. But Delta and American already are on a model that is a centralized model. And not only was it more cost effective in terms of operating costs, in terms of investment cost, you need less safety stock to actually run a model like this. You need some cycle stock, but you need much less safety stock. And so you have big investment savings that then translate into depreciation at the end of the day. But it's one thing to make a decision. The second question is, how large should that distribution center be? And so when you do that, you actually literally build a bottom-up approach where you look at the demand part by part for every airplane in your fleet for the next 15 years with the growth plans that you have at the airline. And of course, at some point, you have to make some hypotheses because not every plane that you have around today will be around 15 years down the road, especially when you think of, for United, a 767 or a 757. And so you rerun those analyses, you forecast how many parts you have. I'll give you one tidbit. I was floored. At the beginning or late 2022, I was told, Hervé, you will get 34.5 million parts by the end of 2023. I was like, no dice. There's no way. That's a 11% increase. I don't buy it. But I still had to use that data point. That's the best we had. Last year, December 31st comes around. I look at my inventory, 34.51. So it was pretty spot on from a forecasting standpoint. So we've leveraged those models, extrapolated those models, and we've sized our distribution center. A distribution center wanted to be about 500,000 square feet. And we've located it where best wants to be located from a logistical standpoint, which for United's footprint is in the vicinity of Houston, Texas. So that's on the one end. Our CFO, when we presented the study to our CFO told us, yes, I believe you, but we've never done this at United Airlines. Please have a third party look at it. We did hire a third party. This is one of the first time
Not Carney, but
in the supply chain where we've hired a third party. That wasn't Carney. And we got them to essentially redo the study on an independent basis to confirm or deny our findings. Their findings were within 10,000 square feet versus the 500,000 square feet we initially found, which also tells you that we were pretty tight in the way we run the analytics. Mm-hmm. The one thing that is key is that all the data you have, no matter what analysis you run, they're always imperfect. And you always have to make some assumptions. And we've had to. The one thing that might surprise you is when we look at part sizes, we didn't have part size here at United. So we went to Airbus and went to Boeing, and we thought for sure that our part sizes. They actually don't. Boeing is in the process of building part sizes in SAP for their customers, but they did not. And Airbus maybe had part sizes for 20% of the parts we carry at United, which meant that we had a lot of holes and a lot of assumptions to do to be able to get to the answer. So that's one example. That's a very concrete strategic decision that was made with a lot of cost avoidance. Of course, when you build a distribution center in Houston, real estate is cheap, is actually a much cheaper decision to make versus building warehouses further, given the United growth at all your hubs. Think of a Newark hub or a San Francisco hub. Increased size at those locations is very, very pricey. So the cost components, the capital required was much less to do in Houston. Strategic business decision-making is one. Second example would be an operational decision. And it's very close to what you've mentioned, Dr. Longshore. We've developed a predictive model to devise based upon the write-up of our technicians and based upon historical write-up of technicians for a given issue, what part might fix the problem. And that enables us to, we cannot tell the technician this part is going to fix the problem because we're not responsible, the technician is. So we cannot cross that border. But we can pre-position the part so that if we see the part is not at a given location, we can pre-position the part to make sure the part is available when the part is needed at a given station. That's a very, very applicable way to use big data, and that is literally big data. because in this case, you use hundreds of thousands of log pages from technicians. You match it back with keywords that are used with the technicians, by the technicians. You match it to the IPC, which is the integrated parts catalog for a given airplane, to enable you to know what can fix a part. And when you do this, your predictive models are very, very, very powerful to make operational decisions. And I think I'll pass it on to Sam, but I'll come back on one example in a bit on profitability analysis, because that's near and dear to my heart. I couldn't not speak to that, of course.
Thank you. I guess I'll approach this subject from a slightly different angle. It's what we've done is we have figured out or tried to figure out how to monetize big data. There are a couple of companies in the industry, they're called fare aggregators. And what they do is they collect all the different selling fares that the airlines have in the industry, and the airlines themselves pay these companies to collect competitive information for them. About 2 years ago, we approached one of these fare aggregators and started buying all of the airline data on fares. And so over those 2 years, we collected, I think right now, we're about 35 terabytes of data. I think that equates to about 5 trillion data points and about 3 billion records. And think about it this way, it's for a flight that is departing in March of 2025 or February of 2025 that's on sale now. Every day we are going to collect the selling fare by cabin, by class for that flight. And so what we've done with this data is kind of backward engineered revenue management algorithms. And we've created a product we call FareX that predicts how airline prices will change over time. So you say, I want to fly, I'm going to go to Paris for the Olympics this summer. I want to fly business class. We'll tell you on our FareX website, you can sign up today, what the selling fare is today and how we think that fare is going to change between now and the day of departure. So now you can actually make an informed decision when is the right time to buy an airline ticket. And so we only have about, even with all that data, we only have about 20% of the markets in the US right now. We're hoping to grow that by the end of the year, obviously to triple the size of our database and continue to grow. That's one example. We have all of this data. We then have to use machine learning and AI to some degree to help us sort through this. We're not using it to do predictions just yet. That's the goal. But as Hervé said, there are flaws in the data. There are gaps in the data. But if you see a fare that's selling for $300 and then there's a few days of gap and then it comes back up at $300, you can kind of make an informed decision to fill in the gap. And that's really what we're using machine learning and automation to fill in those gaps in the big data to help us kind of get a more robust database. So that's really how we're using it, to monetize that and selling these predictions to companies to say, okay, now you can save some money because we're going to tell you when the right time to buy air tickets is, just by using the data that's already out there.
Thank you. So given I'm a consultant now, I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction. So when you think about big data, it's this new, at least 4 or 5 years ago, it was the new AI, right? Everybody just talks about big data, but nobody knows what's to do with it. And similarly, if companies have more data that they can handle, but when you don't know what to do with it, it just becomes useless. And I think that's when, at least I like to say, this is when sometimes the consultants come in. Big data to me is, it was the new gold. And everybody wanted that gold. And I like to think what consultants will help you mine that gold and figure out how you can maximize that gold. So let's talk about 3 examples. So I'm going to break it down into, because most of the examples are client driven, so I'm going to break it down into employees, customers, and say operations. And if you think about employees, and this is something unique. So we did a project for a financial institution where you are taking a look at your candidate's resume, and then you're predicting their performance. I'll say that again. So you're taking a look at the resume, and then you're predicting the performance, and you are predicting what sort of training you want that candidate to take when the person comes in. Now, it was pretty successful that consulting companies have started to do that in-house for their own employees. So there is an algorithm that says you went to a certain school, you were, whatever activities you did, we think this is how your performance will be. And in order for you to go to the next level, we predict certain type of training you need to do. And you're constantly measuring it. And I would say for the most part, it's working. What's the thing about AI, machine learning, whatever you want to call it, what are we trying to achieve? We are trying to increase the predictability and reduce the variance, right? That's the crux of it. Nobody can predict the future. I mean, if you know the future, if I knew the future, I wouldn't be sitting here. But it is predicting, but it's mainly reducing the variability. If things go wrong, how do you quickly react to it? Examples these guys were talking about, let's just talk about even United. How do you quickly react to? Now everything is centralized in Houston. Sure, there's a part in Alaska, part in Shanghai. There are ways to reduce it, and there are ways to improve it in the future too. Sure, you're not going to solve all the problems, but you have still reduced an aircraft being on the ground or an engine being shipped all the way to Shanghai, as an example, if there's an engine out. So that's basically what we're doing from an employee point of view. From a customer point of view, the examples are endless. One of us talked about monetizing. So when you think about customers, there is a pattern that says the type of customers. So let's just talk about the loyalty programs within airlines. The type of customers, when are they shopping? What is the email that is triggering them to buy a certain ticket? Is it employees or customers out of New York, for example, more prone for a certain commercial versus in Houston? I mean, it just goes on and on and on. I mean, but there are just examples are just endless. And third one is operations. So this was Hervé's example, is thinking, if you think about the four walls, how do you make efficiency and how do you predict and make your operations more efficient? Think about a logistics company. So FedEx, UPS, DHL. Especially during COVID, the online and the ground delivery increased significantly. So if you think about ground versus air, ground really increased. People were shipping medical supplies, medicines, guns. There is an information where you can ship ammunition and you can ship concealed weapons through a logistics provider. But being able to predict how the customer is shopping, where they are shopping, where they are shipping, companies are able to take the pressure out of certain hubs. So if you think about FedEx, everything used to ship through Memphis, everything used to ship through Indy. There's a FedEx Ground, a FedEx Air. But knowing your pattern, and there's only so much you can do within Memphis, knowing your pattern, knowing how the package is being shipped and volume, you can bypass Memphis, for example. Very similar to what airlines are doing. But instead of airlines, think about packages. Right? There are a lot of airlines, they're connecting through a certain hub, which is why they are increasing the size of the airplanes. And that's how they are competing with the low-cost carriers. One of the things that airlines have really succeeded in the last few years is they have been able to compete with the low-cost carriers. One is the price, and then the second is they have a bigger airplane that they can use and funnel more people through the hubs. But if the hub gets congested, either it is gates, is it employees, bag delays, departures, arrivals, all that, then you figure out and how do you move around the hubs? Or you have small airlines like Breeze and Avilo, where they will do point to point. So the question is, I mean, look, data is everywhere. The question is, how do you use it? I mean, anything you're doing, somebody's collecting that data.
Okay, give it, okay, one more time. You had another question.
Sure, I can go back to an example. I don't want to speak about it. It's in FBS. So I think Sam, you're with me as my partner in crime, my boss.
Explain what FBS is first.
So no crime was committed in flight profitability system to start with. But what we do in FBS, we aggregate data from various feeds. Some of them real time, others not as real time, more like monthly feeds. And we take those data and we allocate the costs and the revenue to each flight on a flight by flight basis and also by cabin. So one thing that we developed in early 2009, 2010. I'm a geek, okay? I'm going to be very clear about that. It's like, it's cool to do it by flight, but if we can do it by flight, we can do it by passenger. And we can do it also on an incremental basis or non-incremental basis. So what do I mean by that? You know if a passenger is connecting on you or not, but you also know if that passenger was really a passenger that added value to you or not based upon the fare that that person is paying. And so that passenger might be deemed incremental or not, and so you can cost it differently. You can say, Joe, the business class guy that sat in 1A and that boy is full fare, he's gonna get the full burden of fare. But Joe passenger that went from Fort Lauderdale to, let's say, Houston, good spirit market, right? And he bought a end fare on the very bottom of the bracket. That guy, had that seat not been here, would not have carried him, and therefore is an incremental passenger. And so you can look at those differently, but that takes to use big data to do this, and then to allocate the cost around. And so one passenger will see some cost, another one will see a different set of costs. The meals are allocated actually by cabin, so you exactly know how much a first class meal will cost you as a coach meal. And you're able to get to an answer where ultimately, since all your passengers are taxonomized, because you know whether Joe is a Mileage Plus member or not, you're able to say, okay, that Mileage Plus group of global services people, they actually will X profit to United Airlines, but the passengers, the non-members and not traveling coach are actually worth Z. And so if you look at now the revolution that we have in the airline business, you see since the pandemic, Alaska Airlines, Delta Airlines, and United Airlines really being the three darlings out there in terms of profit margin. You then see the Airborne Empire that's a little bit down, right? And that's laden with debt. But then you see the LMAs. We used to call them the ULCCs, the ultra low cost carriers, but now we call them the LMAs, the low margin airlines. And they really struggle because Delta, Alaska, United, but also to some extent American, are able to actually pick up passengers that traditionally would fly on the LMS, ULCCs, and now fly on United or Delta or Alaska or American because we provide a much better service than a ULCC, but we're able to price competitively. And the way you do this, of course, with data at the end of the day, to be competitive in the marketplace, but because you've made a set of decisional data upstream that enables you to do that.
Wow, what do you think? Folks, I think what we'd like to do is we'd like the audience to be able to ask you some questions. Is it working okay? Working on? Got it? Got it, okay. Okay. Yeah, we'd like the audience to ask some questions. You know, you've heard from our panel, the big data, but what kind of questions do you have for the panel members that they can answer?
I'm gonna hand the mic on.
Yeah.
Come on, guys, Q&A. Thank you.
What are some potential areas of data analytics moving into that's not currently in?
Who wants to take the question? Where do you see analytics going that it's not already happening in? Airbay, sorry.
Thank you. I'll take it from an airline standpoint. Two areas, real-time operational data. The airplanes speak to us, and the more models the airplane gets, the better off we are at getting those data. And so AHM, aircraft health monitoring, has become a big deal at United. Call it 4 years ago, AHM had 5 people on the team. AHM now has over 30 people on the team, and we love having the airplanes talking to us because we can know before the airplane is even landing that we have an issue. I'll take the best example when on December 30th, the airplane from San Francisco to Sydney started talking to us. We knew that that plane was going to divert into Pago Pago because that plane was losing oil 3 hours before it actually diverted. We told the captain, sir, you're losing oil. You're not seeing it right away, but we know the airplane is losing oil. You're most likely going to have to divert. And we started organizing the response right away. So that's one space. The second space is actually customization for you. What is your name?
Nick.
Nick. So Nick, if you turn out to be a Mileage Plus member, you're likely to see more and more ads on the United app that are tailored for you, for the Nick from Embry-Riddle. And based upon your buying patterns, we are using more and more AI to actually pollinate the advertisements that we make to our customers to be able to, at the end of the day, to better target them is to have a customized product to them. So it's 2 areas for us.
I'll throw this one out there just because you touched on it, on customization to individuals. I think about the airport experience, think about, you know, getting to the curb, you take your bags out of the car, you go through the doors, check in, through security. Right now, there is a blank policy for every customer. Domestically, you have to check in your bag 45 minutes beforehand, internationally, somehow, generally speaking. However, I see a world where that should be individualized, right? Why can't that be customized? If I'm going straight through clear, TSA pre-check with no bags, I want to be able to just get to the airport. I want to get to the curb about 10 minutes before my flight departs, right? I don't need an hour and a half. Why can't that be customized to me? They know my travel habits. They know I know where the gate is. You know, they know the distance from the curb to the gate. Why can't I just walk on through the street? You know, there's a ton of stuff that can be done. I don't know whether we'll ever get done. But if we know wait times and security, if we know, you know, baggage check-in time, we know all of this, I think that that stuff would be definitely customized down.
Just to add on, I would say more on the customer experience. So if you just think about airline, look, the movement of passengers between point A to point B is not changing. It's not changed for the last 50, 60 years, right? What is changing is how you feel and your experience, whether it is telling you lane 2 is booked or lane 2 is backing up in TSA. Now you need to move to lane 3. That sort of information, I would say, would be the next step. Is I need a welcome screen on my screen that says welcome Nick, whatever, C2A. Or if there's going to be a flight diversion, then the app tells me, how long are you willing to drive? Can you drive for 15 minutes? Guess what? I can put you on a different city and then you can drive. So I think that whole having information beforehand for anything for that matters. I mean, if you think about Ubers and if you think about food delivery, when you know exactly where the car is or the packet, you should be able to expect that anywhere, not just on an airline. If you think about even UPS and FedEx, I mean, UPS is a little bit ahead, but FedEx, for example, is pretty far behind when it comes to package. They will say, oh, your package is coming within the next 3 days. Okay, well, and it's coming between the next 4 hours. Okay, where is the package? Like, just tell me as a dot on my screen, where is it on the route? So I think that sort of customer experience, because as humans, we need that instant satisfaction or instant information. Somebody sends the text, oh my God, reply, right? Or you're sitting on an email saying, refresh, pressing F9, like this person hasn't responded. So customer experience to me it's going to be ubiquitous and it's just going to be second nature.
And I'd like to add, just from a more general perspective. So as you know, as you go through school and as your students, what you can expect, in my opinion, is that from a general point of view, right now, if you want to build a data model, it's a pretty complex process. You've got to know, Python, or you've got to know R, or you've got to know something like that. And then you're building something up to get it to production. You have to know Tableau and you have to connect it there, and your visualizations go through there. And maybe you throw in another source of information, or you're looking for data on the internet and you're web scraping and doing things like that. And the barrier to entry is a bit higher when you want to do things, at a more advanced level. I think the demand for more advanced data analytics, and we've talked about predictive analytics, but there's also prescriptive analytics that are coming to the forefront. And as those things come up, what you can expect is that they'll be adopted in a more platform way, like an Excel or something like that, where the average person can leverage some of that without the knowledge of having to have a whole GitHub account in order to figure out how to put together a script together. I think we'll see things transition more to where those advanced models will become more accessible to the average person, so that you don't have this huge barrier of entry of knowing all these different programs and how they coalesce, and how to use SQL and how to pull things out of SQL and move them into Python, and then take them out of Python and throw them into Power BI and things like that. I think you'll have a more streamlined platform where you can do all of that in one.
Thank you.
Mind if I add some?
Chris was question too. This one starts with question.
Oh, yeah. Come on.
This will be our last question. I know I've got people that want to go to class.
Thanks. So this was what kind of jargons in mind, language in mind, something that they almost it's around I guess we can call more anecdotal data sets than representative. And I guess the question is, if I'm going to go ahead and operate in this, so please accept this as part of the premise of the question. We learn more from our failures than our successes. Do any of you have any interesting stories that you can talk about where Your data analytics gave you type 1 and type 2 errors and how far did you get with it, and when did you know to cut it off, and when did you realize it? So in other words, when did big data lead you to a mistake?
But if I can start with that, if you're not getting some kind of an error at the beginning of a model, then there's probably something wrong with your model. If you're getting a 98% accuracy level from the first, model, then there's probably something wrong with your model. I would say it's more common that you find type 1, type 2 errors in modeling off the bat than not. So where I don't have necessarily a specific story I can point to, I can tell you that very rarely do I come across a data model that works perfectly on the first go.
Yeah, I have a very specific story. Fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know. When I was the managing director of Crew Resources at United, I wanted to step away from Excel for planning the airline and to go towards a more integrated model to plan the pilot headcount, given the fact that the pilots are a very expensive resource. And so we did an RFP with 3 different firms, or we did an RFP to which 3 different firms answered. And each of the 3 firms went through a proof of concept of the model and platform they would set up for United Airlines. And we selected the most viable model out of those 3 in the RFP. And we started to program the model and enter into UAT with said firm. And that firm could not get its model to converge towards a stable solution. And the model, we spent 6 months to try to have that model converge. And we spent over $1 million with the firm to get that model to speed out the right answer. And we could never get to a point where we could prove, where they could prove that the solution generated was optimal because the model wasn't converging enough. And so after 6 to 7 months worth of trying, we had to pause and cancel the productionization of the model with that firm because we just could not make it move towards an optimal solution. And so speak of a failure, to me, there was a big failure. I mean, there was $1 million failure first, but then that also meant that we couldn't, what we thought was the optimal firm to develop the model, and that is a firm that is specialized in manpower resources, not even a firm that's not non-specialized. And they developed optimization model for other industries that just could not produce for United and for the airline business.
Okay, Joe.
All right, last question, anybody? Big question. Long term, let's give you one more chance. Okay, well.
You spoke a lot about the pros of data analytics and AI. Do you think there's any cons of data analytics and AI in aviation?
Cons associated with analytics, gentlemen online.
I will throw at a general level, an overconfidence in just relying on data alone, right? We're, in the airline industry, it's a customer service, customer facing industry. You can't run it sitting behind a desk on Excel. And so, yes, you can run models on that, but getting the input of frontline employees, getting that human input is very important, beyond just models telling you what the best thing to do.
We've just launched United GPT about 3 weeks ago. It's a version customized of ChatGPT for United. The first thing we tell our employees is be circumspect of the answer. we know those models are prone to generating hallucinations, right? And that's literally the technical term of it. And we want to make sure that our employees do not take the answer for granted and that they question. There are multiple of examples out there, whether this be in the industry or not, around comical, to be candid, outcomes of people that have taken the answer for granted and made fool of themselves. The problem is that if you start using those tools for business decision-making purposes and that you're not circumspect of the answer, you will absolutely make a catastrophic mistake.
I
mean-
would add, simplicity is sometimes better than complexity. Just because it's a complex model, with 15 layers or something, it doesn't make it a better model necessarily. Always err on the side of simplicity, and more data doesn't necessarily mean a better model either.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, models are what? They're garbage in, garbage out. I mean, it's whatever you feed in is what you're gonna get out. But that's why at least I like to think that when you guys graduate, AI is not going to be taking away all the jobs. Sure, there are some jobs, but you still need to make business decisions and you need a human element and not just model. So the question is, the model helps you to get your job done faster and efficiently, but it doesn't do the job for you.
All right.
Thank you very much. Folks, I think we owe them a round of applause. Thank you very much. Okay.
And with that, we conclude today's panel. I hope to see lots more people here tomorrow when we look at the waves of space commercialization. And I promise it'll be great on the finance, the economics, the whole run. So have a great day. Thank you for being here. Edmund, Pablo, thanks for joining us.